Hi there, this is Joe Barnosky with Church Tech FAQ, and I'm joined today by Robert Delahunt. Robert and I met through a local worship leaders gathering that happens once a month in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And Robert is an expert on a topic that I know almost nothing about. And so we talked back and forth online and developed a few questions. And what we want to introduce to you today is the idea of using hardware synthesizers in worship instead of using software synths. And so we're gonna do 4 short videos that bring together a variety of things. So our first video here is gonna be what can hardware synthesizers do for worship? And then in the next video, we're gonna get into exactly how to make these kinds of sounds, like how to tweak them and get into the settings. And then our third video will be how do synths start? So once you know how the parameters work, how do you take something that's existing and shape it to be exactly what you want, especially in a worship setting? And then our last video is gonna be some more advanced techniques, especially connecting with other outboard gear and using controllers to make different devices do different things that all come together. So Robert, I'm really excited to get together today and to talk through all this stuff. So let's open up with a discussion on what synthesizers can do. The first thing that they're commonly known for is pads. And so talk a little bit about pads. What are pads?
That's exactly right, Joe. I don't know if I call myself an expert, but yeah, you're right. Hardware synthesizers are mainly known for their pads. Right now I have like a Roland System 1 in front of me, and honestly it was my first synthesizer, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but it was the one that I first started to love in terms of like how the pads sound on it. You'll see that on our recording of some songs. But like, I really do love how it sounds. So yeah, hardware synthesizers, pads are like one of the #1 things that come up. And there's so many pads to choose from, so many synthesizers to choose from, so it's like, it's difficult sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Even because I come from a software synth background per se, I'm more, historically, I've been more of I need it done, so what's a preset that I can use? Mm-hmm. But as far as shaping, every time I've tried to customize a pad, I've opened up the synthesizer menu, looked at the window, and closed it because there's just too much in there. So I'm really excited. So we've got pads, we've also got plucks. What are plucks like?
Plucks are sort of like a passing or momentary type of patch. Where what you're getting is, I mean, in hardware synthesizer, it would be like, high delay, high release, and no attack or sustain. So it might sound like so the patch, it's just gonna like fade out really quickly. And I'm using a patch that may not be the best plug for that, but we'll get into that in terms of in fact, House of the Lord has a good one.
Yeah, it does. So that's plucks. Another thing that hardware synths can do is string type sounds. Mm-hmm. What does that sound like on a synth?
Well, that's going to be a difficult one because, see, hardware synthesizers are designed to make their own sound, even if some are like, like analog that's like simulated in digital, like this one is. They're designed to make their own sounds, and so you'll have plenty of patches, and again, like I don't blame someone who like looks at this and they're like, man, I just don't want to do that. Like I don't have time to learn all the parameters of synthesizers. I get it. A lot of us are busy and have busy lives, and so like we're really giving God like our praise and worship, our valuable time and our talents on Sunday. So I get it. Like in your situation, no, that's fine. For synthesizers, it'll depend on what type of strings you want. But the thing to remember first is they're not going to sound like having an actual string quartet in your sanctuary. That would be more the domain of like really nice, like expensive sampled stuff, right?
Yeah.
But you can run strings, and there's going to be a snippet of Love is War by Hillsong that we're going to use in a second. Their pianist or keyboardist, whose name escapes me, he does master classes all the time. For Love is War by Hillsong, he sampled like, I think it's a Jupiter 8 type of patch, like an old vintage, and he says that in his master classes that he samples old vintage strings. So there's times and places for it. It's just, you're not gonna get like a string quartet sound, but you'll get close. It just depends on how 80s you want to sound or not. So the one I use for this synthesizer, I use this one. You can build your own, and I can go over that on another video, but You see, it's sort of like more of a pad and less of a strings.
Sure.
You can add parameters to make it sound a little bit like you're getting. Like, if you wanted to make that simulated sound, where like, probably reverse is actually better. Like at the beginning of a song like Lord of Hosts, where you hear on the recording where they have like the string quartet, they're like da 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 da.
Okay.
You can make it a little bit, but you're not going to get it perfect.
Sure.
But for the most part, a default string patch is not going to sound too bad, really.
Yeah, especially for someone who doesn't have access to strings players at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Very cool. And then the last thing that we talked about briefly was leads, like a synth lead. And so that's going to be more sharp and direct, right? Like.
Yeah. Like, you've heard the mashup between What a Beautiful Name and Agnus Dei?
Yeah.
Where they immediately go into and because I grew up with Michael W. Smith's album where like he does that song and there's that big soaring lead everyone's playing together. I think it was in B flat. So on this one, I'm going to go into what's called a plug out, a Pro Mars, which is it simulates like an 80s synth. And it's going to sound a little bit like some Chariots of Fire here, but. And of course, you can customize how it sounds to make it sound more like what you want. Like, for example, it's got too much delay, so I'm going to shut that off.
Sure.
But for most intents and purposes, that works fine in church. It just depends on what you need.
Yeah, absolutely. So overall, a hardware synthesizer can give you pads and plucks and strings and bells and synth. Oh, did we talk about bells? I skipped bells. I apologize.
The funny thing is when I got here, I realized I hadn't put any bells on the front end. Let me see if I can find some on the back end of my patches. There's one. Okay, yeah, I remember now. I loaded them all on like the last set of 8. Bells. It just depends on what type of bells you want.
Oh, yeah.
But again, they're not going to sound exactly like acoustic bells. You can get pretty close if you want to sit there and tweak with it. Like on my System 8, I have like a hand bells type, patch. Like for the hand bells. Remember that when we were younger?
Oh, yeah.
But for the most part, the bells on a synthesizer aren't going to sound like very, very exact. But you'll probably find at least a few patches that like work in church, or you can like modify slightly to work in church.
Yeah. I think in the church tech world in particular, we run into situations where you have one person at the church who is a jack of all trades and master of some, even, and that one person ends up doing a whole lot of things. So they might not really be the IT, like network IT person, but they're going to end up managing it because there's no one else to do it. I feel like a hardware synth is that person in the staff. Like if you don't have handbells and you don't have a string quartet and you don't have a massive software library of sounds that you can just pull up at the touch of a button, like one person can make all of these things happen if they just learn a little bit about what they're doing. And to a point, yes, because if you're looking for like something that like mega churches are going to like make sounds or that sound exactly like, they're using a lot of expensive stuff that may not fill your budget, but like for small and medium churches, especially small churches, like a System 1 like this, only like about $300 used because they're not being, they just stopped being sold new. It's going to be great. It's going to do basically everything you need, So then that's like something we've been talking about, sort of like the side topic is like, who's going to notice that your bells aren't bells in church, right? Probably 99% of the people that come to your church are probably not going to notice that, hey, that doesn't sound like a handbell. They're more like they're more like metallic or whatever, right? And that's fine because really no one's going to complain because you're just doing it for church. But if you're a purist, like there's like 1%, like there's usually that one person on your worship team that's like, well, I can tell the difference. That's fine. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Some things are never going to be good enough for some people, and there's a church for those people, and we would love to invite them there.
But that being said, though, in worship, if I'm playing bells in church and like say you're my worship leader or my worship director, and you're like, hey, I love how that sounds. Can you turn that into keys? Boop, done.
Nice.
I can make that sound like. In fact, maybe I'll like real quickly see if I can just quickly. I like that one. Maybe let's try that. There, now it sounds more like keys, even though it still has that bellish sound. Or I can go back to bells.
Yeah.
So I think the strength of synthesizers is the adaptation. If you are my worship leader and you're like, hey, I like that pad, but it's like too dark, can you bring up the brights on it? You can do that and like right on the fly.
That's awesome.
And likewise, if you're like, oh, I don't like how that sounds because it's too whatever, like too. I think one of the ones that bothers me the most is like flanger, like. On my bigger one, the System 8, when it's got a flanger in the patch, I don't like flanger as an effect. So like, if the worship leader's like, I don't like that one, I'm like, okay, hold on, I'm taking it out.
Right, yeah. My first guitar effects pedal, a multi-effects pedal, and every time I would go through and I would see the flanger button lit up, I would get mad and no, skip it.
Yeah, I don't like flanger either, but that's, I'm sure there's someone out there that can use flanger in worship just great. It's just not us.
Right. So we've covered a little bit, but what are the primary advantages of a hardware synth instead of a software synth? Like using MainStage with a MIDI controller.
Okay. Well, let's just be honest. I mean, like if you're one of those people again that you just need to come in, hit a button, and like sound exactly like Hillsong or Gateway or like Lakeview, Lakewood, then maybe like hardware synthesizers are not going to be your cup of tea. But at the same time, if you're willing to go through patches and load up stuff, it'll be fine. So it's sort of like separate worlds. A hardware synthesizer mainly like excels where you have to adapt on the fly, right? So like with an Ableton, Omnisphere type setup, MainStage, you have to get like a Bluetooth like controller right here that you can adjust your filters, right? Well, I already have that. So like for me, that's the advantage. I would say that one other advantage is like everyone's had the dreaded MacBook update right before a service. I'm not judging Mac. I actually like Mac. It's just hardware synthesizers don't have that problem at all. Like I can and that's why in fact some mega churches you see them, they have like the Nord up there. I'm not necessarily against or for a Nord, but it's a synthesizer technically. It's a hardware synthesizer, so they'll have that as their MIDI controller into Ableton, MainStage, Omnisphere, whatever. And the benefit there, if you have them, like that's a lot of money. But if the benefit there would be like if the laptop went down for whatever reason, they can just unplug the MIDI and like turn on the Nord and go. Yeah. So, it just really depends on what you want. Synthesizers specialize in creating new sounds, live adaptation of sounds and stuff like that. In fact, honestly, this set. The Roland System 1 and System 8 that I use are part of what's called the IRA series from Roland. And that's like everything else on that series is like drum machines, DJ, mix, right? So like, I thought about that several times in terms of like the big C church. Like, are we reaching out to people that are from various backgrounds? Why not have someone on team that like, can literally do the DJ thing and like the turntablist? Why not? I mean, as far back as New Life Worship had on, what was that album? I can't remember, but like I remember like they had several times on Glorious God is the track, yeah. Okay. On the beginning you hear like some turntablist is, bringing it in.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Everything should praise God.
Yeah, absolutely. I was at a worship conference in 2003, so I'm dating myself here. But there was a very famous worship leader who may or may not have been Rick Pino, who remixed a song and like actually house DJ'd the entire like keynote speech. Like he just ran worship style sounds with a turntable and everything, and they would just go back and forth between speaking and worship for an hour and a half, and it was just this big interactive thing. And I know that he continued that on for a long time, and so yeah, that capability isn't far-fetched. Yeah, it's just not commonly used. It's not what we see in mainstream.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more than mainstream out there.
Yeah. So like ideally in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, you know, if you found a turntablist, like you led him to Christ, you know, he wants to join the worship team, stuff like that. Put one of these next to his turntables, and now he can do both.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. There's room, right?
There's room. There's room at the, you know what I mean? There's room at the table.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So cool. If this sounds like something that you want to do with your church, if you're interested in hardware synths, instead of spending a bunch of money on a software system, then the next worship video, the next video that we're going to do is going to be on hands-on, customizing those sounds for worship. And then we've got 2 videos after that that are going to go deeper into sequencers and connecting external gear. So stay tuned for the next video right now.